It's that they have a very different skill set than the people, you know, with the welding torches and the rivet guns. It's a very different person who's working on, why is this robot not doing things correctly? How do I fine-tune this? It's a very different skill set. So manufacturing is a huge American comeback story, but it's a different type of manufacturing. It needs a different level of talent, and that's what we're really concerned about here. The short of this is, in the last 5 years, the first time ever that more non-Americans got US patents than Americans. So even our own ideas are mostly coming from elsewhere now. Let me give you a little background. I'm going very quickly through these. In general, this is the percentage of students who score advanced on international tests. This is just math, science, and reading look roughly similar. I've helpfully pointed out for you where American students are. And contrary to popular belief, these are not apples and oranges comparisons now. That was probably fair 20 years ago. These are very good, well-administered tests now. We do not produce the world's top students anymore. Let's go state by state very, very quickly. This is the NAEP. This is the big national assessment. It's a very high quality assessment. I'm going to show you math grade 4, math grade 8, then reading language arts grade 4 and grade 8. This is the percent of students who score advanced. You don't want to be red. Green is better. So that's grade 4 math. That's grade 8 math. That's better, both for the US and for the Commonwealth. This is grade 4 reading. Not bad. That's grade 8 reading. You might not have noticed the difference between these two, so let me show those to you again. Grade 4 reading, grade 8 reading. Grade 12 data isn't awesome data. It's hard to motivate high school seniors to take a test in the spring before they graduate. But those data suggest that this pattern is even worse. Pretty much solid red for 12th graders. So we're not producing as many excellent students as we probably need to keep our culture and our economy humming along. If we had more time, I would talk about this. We just did a study. We were looking at the federal education law that was just reauthorized. And one of our concerns is that it talks a lot about grade level proficiency. It's all about getting students to grade level. And as I'll talk about, I'm not sure getting students to grade level is really the end zone for us, if you will. It's more like the 25-yard line. And so I was complaining about this to a foundation head, and she asked a great question. She said, well, how many of our students are actually above grade level? And I said, okay, how many students, for example, started 4th grade this fall already documenting that they can work at a 5th grade level or higher? I assumed the percentages would be 10, 15%. We looked at data from almost every single state. Actually, every state was included in at least one of the 6 different databases that we used. We used different tests, different subject areas. The numbers all came out roughly the same. In English language arts, it's 20 to 45% of students start the school year already having demonstrated that they know everything that they're about to be taught. 20 to 45%. Generally, the percentage gets higher as you move into middle school, which we didn't expect either. 10% were at least 4 grade levels up. So that was at least 10% of 4th graders working at an 8th grade level. At the 8th grade proficiency level. Math, it's a little bit lower. We think that's because it's harder for students to push themselves further in math. And it's harder for teachers to allow them to move further because it's kind of hard to teach a 4th or 5th grader calculus. There are ways to do it, but I think that's why that number is lower. And then this caused us to go and look at different data. We have a few estimates now that the average elementary school classroom has 8 to 11 grade levels of student performance in it. Now imagine that you're a new teacher. Imagine that you're a new teacher. You've been trained really well. You've got tons of energy. When you get into that classroom and you suddenly realize you have to differentiate 8 to 11 grade levels, because you're not using ability grouping or anything like that. We already know that differentiation, right, is one of the hardest skills for teachers to do. Study after study after study has shown us this for over 20, 25 years now. It's extremely difficult. It takes years to master. It's especially hard when you're not ability grouping or cluster grouping or something like that. It's doable, but only our best teachers can really do it right out of the gates, if you will. 8 to 11, some of the estimates that we've seen are 13, which if you think about it, that's every grade level, which is shocking. So the 21st century, brave new world, a lot of the things that used to work for this country in terms of finding and developing talent just don't make sense anymore. The world has changed, and a lot of these changes have literally happened in the last decade. It's not over the last 100 years, it's over the last 5 to 10 years. We've seen tremendous cultural, social, intellectual, educational change. Schools and how we educate students, how we develop talent has to change along with that. And again, when people say, oh, bright kids will take care of themselves, we don't have to worry about them, I think these data pretty clearly show, yeah, okay, and I hear that all the time from people, and I always say, you know, you're totally right, except for all the kids that doesn't really work for, which I'm going to make the case is 60 to 75%. Let's talk about excellence gaps really quickly. I once made this graphic because one of my colleagues had a fancy graphic in his presentation, and I thought I can do fancy graphics too. So I called my 3rd grade over and said, look what your dad did. And he was totally silent. And so I said, well, see, I'm trying to say, he goes, oh, I understand it, it's just not good. The important part here is that proficiency gaps, getting students to that, out of that novice into that proficiency category, those gaps do not correlate with excellence gaps. A rising tide does not lift all ships when it comes to promoting talent. We really believed that was true for a long time in the No Child Left Behind era. It turns out it's not. And we have a few studies now that pretty strongly suggest that, for example, in reading, the strategies that we use to get students up to grade level in reading are not the same cognitive strategies we use to help students become advanced users of language. So these are different types of solutions. It's not the same problem, so it can't, by definition, solve itself.
And where is Kentucky on there for those of us who...
Kentucky, I think I have a laser. I'm going to share fairly detailed data with you in 1 second. So we've been working on excellence gaps for a long time. Very quickly, so this is the percent of students from 1996 to 2013 who scored advanced on the NAEP grade 4 math test. Most other subject areas and grade levels would look the same. So for our purposes tonight, I'm just going to stick with this. One, I don't think most people could have told you how few students scored advanced 20 years ago. That's amazingly low. Some groups have done better. So this top group is the group that does not qualify for federal lunch assistance. No free reduced lunch. This is the group on the bottom that does qualify. Meager, meager gains. This is a big problem because these students are over half of our student population now. About 3 years ago, we crossed 50%. It actually increases about 1.25% each year. It has not slowed down since 2009. If anything, it's ticked up a little bit. So we're getting more and more students who are economically vulnerable every single year. And unfortunately, very few of them are scoring at advanced levels. If you do it by race, it's pretty much the same story. Asian American, white, black, Hispanic students. I'm sorry, Hispanic, black students. And people ask why we don't use other content areas. One, the feds don't test them nearly as much, so we don't have very good data. But the data are actually worse in areas like science, writing, history, civics. Almost no advanced scorers in any group. I don't know about you, but it scares me that we don't have advanced students in science. It seems pretty important to this country. We can't import all of our talent, which is really what we're trying to do now. What about Kentucky? I know you're sitting here going, ugh, if it weren't for those other 49 states and DC, we'd be crushing it, but not so much. I do have to say, it defaults to blue or red, and I didn't want to get into any college rivalries. So I'm sure some university in Kentucky has green. Just assume I did it for you, because I didn't want to get involved. So these are all students. This is grade 4 math again. This is the brand new data that just came out on 2015. 7%. That's a little low nationally. There's no reason why that number couldn't be 15% in a state like Kentucky. I included gender because that's a bigger gender gap than we normally see. 9% versus 5%. In most states now, it's a couple percentage points at most. And then if it were language, it would be flipped, a couple percentage points. You have a fairly typical language gender gap. You have a surprisingly large, I mean, that's almost 100%. And then if you did it by race, you would see this too, but this is by lunch status. I actually have those flip-flopped, sorry. That's on lunch assistance, not on lunch assistance. That is very large, but it's fairly typical in the United States. Fairly typical. So, when people say these kids will take care of themselves, no, they aren't. They aren't. And unfortunately, the ones who aren't now do make up about 65 to 75% of our student population in those states. In some states, it's close to 100%. So we're getting smaller and smaller groups of students that we're getting all of our talent from. A state like Massachusetts is a great example of this. Massachusetts has great test scores, and their excellence rates are essentially the best in the country, some of the best in the world. But their excellence gaps are the biggest in the country. So they've done it mostly with upper socioeconomic status, white and Asian American students. I live close to Massachusetts. I grew up close to Massachusetts. They have like 3 of the 10 poorest cities in the country in terms of childhood poverty. Their success, I'm not saying it's smoke and mirrors. They've done some amazing things. But they are not helping, and they're not helping themselves, I think, by not getting talent developed. All these talented students who are not performing at advanced levels. Really big excellence gaps. That's going to haunt us. So we can predict with a pretty high accuracy that a talented student, even if they're performing at advanced levels in 2nd or 3rd grade, the research is very clear that almost none of them will be performing at that level by the time if they graduate high school, by the time they get to the end of high school. We used to call it the permanent talent underclass, but we decided that was too depressing. It's also accurate, though. We're not seeing a lot of these students moving into those advanced levels, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we think we can do about this. So we'll go with persistent talent underclass. But here, and Dr. Roberts and I, she was one of the first ones to work with me on this. We just, again, we need to take advantage of the fact that our country is gigantic, right? So even small improvements in closing that excellence gap are going to produce tens of thousands of talented students in student populations that where we haven't seen them before. That can really change things for people. So for example, if we close the low-income excellence gap roughly by half, we're not going to be Pollyanna-esque and say, we're going to wipe out poverty, we're going to wipe out discrimination, we're going to make sure everyone gets a perfect education and get this to 0. That's not terribly likely in the near future. What if we just decrease it by half? That's 80,000 more students. Back of the envelope calculation for our new book I'm about to talk about is that that's about 750,000 students. That's actually a really important number because there's each year we have about 725,000 international students who come to our colleges, universities, etc. We really depend on those 725,000. We have at least that many talented students right here. Right there. We're just not developing their talents. We could flood the economy and our culture, our communities, with people taking advantage of their talents. Think how that would change things for us. We believe that's a doable goal each year. So, how do we engage and eliminate these excellent scabs? Do you see how I cleverly used your slogan? Yeah, did my homework. So we have a book. It's not really forthcoming anymore. It's not officially released until another couple weeks, but you will see we have copies here today. What Scott and I did, Harvard came to us and said, you know, could you write a book? Can you write a book that summarizes how we actually solve this problem? We've raised awareness around the country, and my initial response was, nope, we do not know enough yet. We decided, we talked to people for 2 months. I did something that's making us flash. Is that my warning? I still have 5 minutes. Nice That's good. I like that. I'm going to use that next time I screw up something. We talked to people for 2 months.